Hey my good friends, Sam Haymart with Test Driven TV. Today we are test driving the all-new 2024 Ford Ranger Raptor. Yeah, and so we're gonna have a good look at it inside and out. We're gonna take it for a little bit of a drive off-road, and then I'm gonna tell you what I really think. All right, my good friends, let's talk about the truck that we've got here. This is a Shelter Green 2024 Ford Ranger Raptor, the Raptor being the top of the trim grade lineup and really the most that you can spend on the Ford Ranger for 2024. As tested, this one is $59,000 and some change. It does have a couple of options on it that we'll talk about. Now for 2024, the Ranger is essentially an evolution of the last generation. I would not call it 100% new from the ground up. Exterior sheet metal, interior is all new in design. The frame has been substantially updated, but the footprint is essentially the same. A lot of the internal structure of this cab is essentially the same. You can see that in the door lines, but it does have a longer wheelbase that was pushing the front axle forward, allowing a little bit better dynamics and a little bit more flexibility in how they were designing with the powertrain up front. This is the first time in the United States we could get a Raptor in the Ranger. Raptor's well known as a franchise with the F-150, big bulging fenders, big bulging fender flares, unique bodywork, and all of the off-road goodness. Well, it's here on the Ranger too. You can see that right up front, some of the same styling DNA that we've come to see on the F-150. Little air scoops here and there, those big fender flares. And the wheels here, 17-inch B-lock capable. These are an optional wheel on the Raptor. 33-inch BF Goodrich tires. Looking right at the front, that's really where the money's at when it comes to the styling upgrades. Big Ford block letter grille, lower bumper, unique to this truck, steel, tow hooks up there. Looking down underneath it, you've got the big steel bash plate. That's steel, not aluminum. And then further back underneath this has a full battery of skid plates underneath all the powertrain components that you want to protect. LED headlights with the C-shaped signature in them. And then down below that, LED fog lights. Coming down the side, this has some nice running boards which have a nice grippy surface. I always look at a Raptor when I see these things and I think I'd really rather have rock rails, and that's not what these are. If you really do heavy duty off-roading, you want to take these off because you will tear them off if you start going up and over things. That's what rock rails are for. I'd really rather they did that here. But nonetheless, if you want running boards, these are pretty good ones. Your boots are not going to slip off of them. Suspension is really what the Raptor's all about when it comes to capability. This has a lifted ride height, but most importantly, a very unique suspension. Forged aluminum A-arms, top and bottom, Fox shocks that are adaptive, and you can really look at that. It looks quite exotic, very similar to what we're seeing on the Toyota TRD Pro. Not exactly the same, but kind of the same level of suspension upgrade. At the rear, this has a fully floating solid axle with multi-links and a Watts linkage in the center that keeps the rear axle located from a side-to-side movement and really allows a lot more articulation than a leaf spring suspension would do. So that's a big bonus for off-roading. At the rear, you'll see the same bulging rear haunches that we've come to expect on Raptor, the larger fender flares. Below the bumper, you'll see big dual exhaust tips. This has got quite an exhaust system on it. You can hear that, you can feel that, and we'll talk about that when we get out for the drive. And of course, some pretty robust tow hooks back there. So those things don't appear that they're gonna get plucked off of there very easily. On this truck standard is a power opening rear window, and then optional on this is the spray and bed liner. The tailgate is a soft open tailgate, very nicely done. All right, my good friends, we're out here in the off-road trail just outside of Phoenix, Arizona, and it's time to start our drive. So the Ranger Raptor, I have to tell you, I was pretty excited at the prospect of driving because I like the full-size F-150 Raptor, but I tend to lean more towards mid-sized trucks as my preference, just because for doing things like this, in my world, they tend to be more versatile, more manageable, and a little bit more nimble out on the trail for off-roading. That's just my personal preference. So here we are. We've got the Mongo off-road suspension that we've talked about briefly. We've got a great four-wheel drive traction system here, 2-speed transfer case, and we've got a lot of electronic traction toys that are just way too much to list. You can look at the Ford website and get the idea, but I'm going to stop here and I'm going to put this in 4 low because there are a couple of things I do want to talk about. So I'm putting it neutral here, shifting to 4 low, 4x4 shift in progress. Okay, we're there. Now, over here on the screen, I have the buttons for the front and rear locking differentials. Now, don't need all of this today, but I do like to test the rear locking differential on this particular spot that we're going to go to because it's got a great little mogul that causes, you know, sometimes a wheel to lift off, and that's really where that's a bonus to have when you have a free wheel and you don't want to depend on the ABS traction control to try to fix that problem for you. So 4 low, we got the rear locker on. It's a pretty steep, rocky, loose gravel hill, and so it's a nice thing to have. Now this engine has a nice demeanor when you're down in 4 low. It just sort of creeps along. Now coming up here over this mogul here, it's just, there's nothing there at all. The rear locker and the articulation of this suspension really makes tight spots like this a breeze. We're coming around this little hairpin corner here, and my locked rear axle is giving me a little bit of headache, so I'm actually going to disengage that. And while I'm here, I'm going to also disengage the 4 low because we don't need that anymore. I'm going to put it back up in 2 high because it's all downhill from here, baby. Now, I do have to make a bit of a multi-point turn here because this is a nice tight turning circle, but it was only one little switchback, not 2 like in the full-size F-150. Now, this does have downhill descent control and all of those wonderful toys. I tend not to use those. But this just is a vehicle that with its capability, it's just child's play. This is nothing. It literally is nothing. I bring crossover SUVs up here sometimes. I brought my front wheel drive Ford Maverick up this hill. It was a little bit more skill required than this. This is a vehicle that has all of the off-road chops and the tools that you need to do even the most extreme hairy stuff. You can blow and go at high speed out across the desert. And that really gets us to what we're doing now, is a little bit more of a trail drive that's bumpy, it's full of ruts and curves. And this suspension and this chassis just feels as solid as it gets. I'm not getting any rattling or shuddering in the suspension over these ruts and bumps. This is comfortable. This is well bolted together. I like what I'm feeling. The steering has a nice feel. And I will point out that the suspension is completely adjustable. There's the drive mode button down here on the center console that is sort of a one-stop shop for a lot of this stuff that ties itself to the suspension and the steering and the engine and the transmission, depending on what you select. But you can also go over here on the steering wheel and you can select how you want that suspension set. You can select how you want your steering set, and you can also select how you want your exhaust set. And we'll get to that here in a minute. We're still on the trail. I got a big rut coming here. I'm going to roll through pretty good. No bottoming out. This thing has got Mongo suspension travel. It's got Mongo clearance underneath. It's just really a nice tool for being able to come out to a place like this and even hairier places without worrying about a damn thing. Now for something a little bit different, and this is actually one of my favorite places, and this is the washboard road. Not nearly as, you know, off-road centric as what we were just doing on the trail, but this is a road that for me always shows me how well put together a vehicle is, especially a pickup truck, because this vibrating washboard surface can make even the best of them feel like a total piece of junk. So what I'm finding out here is that this chassis is sublimely well tuned. A lot of rubber bushing action going on. These Fox shocks and the adaptive suspension that you can tune to your liking, it just really offers not only a lot of travel and a lot of versatility for the trail, but it offers a nice magic carpet, soft, compliant ride out here at speed on this washboard surface. And these tires offer a really good level of bite. I'm going at a little bit bigger clip than I would be in a lot of vehicles with street tires, because these gravel corners, you start going around these things too fast and the laws of physics like to step in. And even though we do have stability control, which can usually arrest any kind of sliding, it can still get a little bit nerve-wracking. And so this is a nice, confident driving experience out here, that I've got grip and I've got a suspension that's really making the ride quite comfortable. I'm not getting any rattling, cattle guard, or shuddering in the suspension, any looseness in the steering. This feels tight as can be. It feels good and well weighted, and it's quiet. That's how quiet it is. It's a magic carpet out here. The only noise I really hear is the rattle in the dash that I expect in every Ford. And I say that with love. I have owned a lot of Fords. I own one now. They almost all have a rattle in the dash. It's just part of the brand DNA. On the pavement, where most people are going to be living with this vehicle most of the time, I find that the tuning of the suspension is a nice balance of stiffness and control and the compliance that we want in an off-road vehicle. And that's one of the benefits I've always liked about the Fox shock suspension that Ford puts together on these Raptors, and the tuning they choose, as well as the adjustments that you're able to make to really dial it in a little bit more to your preference. This offers the nice, soft, compliant, smooth and fluid type of off-road experience that you want. But when you bring it out on the road, it's not like driving a Marshmallow, like say, Jeep Wrangler. Not a bad thing. I kind of like it. It's a charm for the Jeep Wrangler, but you don't want to be throwing those things around a corner on a back road like this at speed. This is a vehicle that you can drive in the city, on the highway, on a mountain paved road, and be able to take a corner with it at speed and not worry about it too much. It's very stable. The damping rates are good. The steering has a nice direct feel. And these off-road tires, even as chewy as they are out there in the dirt and the gravel, you can throw it into a curb and they give you a sense of confidence. So I like that. That's a good thing. It's also quiet. 57.7 decibels on our 70-mile-an-hour freeway test, and that is below average. Average is about 60-ish, 61. So it's quiet, and not a lot of tire noise from these tires either. And this is noisy pavement out here where we're at, and I don't even hear them buzzing and making noise out here. So I'm impressed with the chassis on this truck. Cattle guard. Yeah, it is. And I was impressed with the last Ranger in some of the trim grades that had the right tuning. It's a solid chassis, it's well done, it's well bolted together. This chassis, with all of its benefits on and off the road, gets 5 out of 5 stars. Now the fun part, for me at least, is talk about what's under the hood, because for me, that's really where this truck makes me smile above and beyond the driving experience. First of all, this has the dial-a-sound exhaust, which you can really crank all the way up to loud, Baja. It says off-road only, so I guess maybe I'm breaking a law. I don't know. So I've got the exhaust turned all the way up on loud, and what we've got under the hood here is a 3-liter twin turbocharged EcoBoost V6, 405 horsepower, 435 pound-feet of torque. Essentially the same motor that's in the Bronco Raptor. And so if you watch my videos, you know the question I always like to ask is, how does it go? So we're going to come to a complete stop out here in the middle of nowhere and go. Woo! Listen to that. And 60. It's got a nice sound. Woof. It's also got paddle shifters here. Big metal paddle shifters. I don't usually use those, but they're there if you want to use them. I am slowing down because we are in an off-road vehicle. But listen to that. Yeah. Nice. It picks up speed rather good. And this transmission, this 10-speed automatic transmission that Ford has devised, works perfectly in almost everything I've driven it in. I love it. It's a great motor, great transmission combination for this truck. The competition, as we know, Toyota and Chevrolet in their Uber off-road midsizers both offer a 4-cylinder turbo, which aren't bad on the face of it, but this V6 offers a nicer, richer sound, more torque, a nice sound, and more power, right? So now fuel economy, I got 16 miles per gallon in my week with it, so you know, it's not about fuel economy, this truck, but I've also been driving it like you've seen me driving it. I've just really been enjoying the power of this engine. Now, are there any drawbacks to this powertrain? Yes. Cattle guard. First of all, it has auto start stop, which kicks on even out here at 100+ degrees in the summer, but you can turn it off. The only problem is it defaults on every time you start the engine. Annoying. But the thing I really noticed about this engine, just like I did in the Bronco Raptor, as well as other Broncos with a 2.7 similar engine, is that in the summer, idling in city traffic with the air conditioner on, this engine idles rough. It's rough. And around town with the air conditioner on, the refinement level of the engine itself is not quite what you'd expect. It's just a little bit on the rough edge side, not in a super bad way, but I have to have something that I say that isn't glowing about it, right? Just something to point out. If you're expecting super smooth V6 action, at least with the AC on and super hot weather, you're not going to get that. But outside of that, this is a powertrain that's got plenty of power, and I think betters almost anything you can get in the competition right now. This powertrain gets 4 out of 5 stars. Last but not least, let's talk about the interior here. And I have to tell you, if you hear the background noise going on, it's because it's 116 degrees out here right now, and I've got the engine running and the air conditioner running so that I can survive, man. So the interior on the 2024 Ranger has been completely redesigned. If you've looked into them, you already know this. The big news, of course, is that when you look at the dash, it's got the big portrait style screen in the center. Basically every fitment in here is new. Now the Ranger had a pretty good interior going before. This one is on the same level, if not a little bit higher, in terms of design and quality materials. I'm pretty impressed so far. And of course we are in the top trim grade here. Seats are Ford Performance sport seats that have some nice suede and leather, code orange accents. They look really nice and they are comfortable as all get out. Riding and driving in this all week, I've been very happy with these. They are heated seats, but they are not ventilated. There is a heated steering wheel here, a leather covered steering wheel. The Ford Performance steering wheel with the red stripe on the center of it says Raptor on it. All kinds of switch gear that is for all of the normal stuff, but also the drive modes, the exhaust, the suspension, and the steering. Looking ahead of me is a fully digital instrument cluster, which is pretty cool because it actually has sort of the layout that we've seen even up into the Super Duty trucks with the 2 gauges on the right and left, and then 4 smaller in the top. Same layout, but it's fully digital. Over here, of course, the aforementioned portrait style infotainment system. Luckily, there are hard controls down here for a lot of the climate controls, in addition to the climate controls that are built into the screen. So it's a nice combination of that. And down below here, console is completely redesigned. There's a place for your phone down here. It is a wireless charger on this particular vehicle. And instead of the round knob, I love that they've given us a toggle shifter down here. I just think that's the right thing to do in this world right now for men and their trucks. Knobs, those are for girls. Now, some of you out there are going to yell at me for that, probably the girls, but seriously, I have a knob in my Ford Maverick. Hate it. I wish I had this. Cup holders off to the side, and drive mode and some other buttons here. Inside here, the level of storage is pretty good. It's almost about the cubic feet or cubic inch space in 3-dimensional terms as, I'd say, 1.5 square tissue boxes. There's a nice little tray that goes on top, plenty of space down there, and it's a nice comfortable level here as you sit here in the vehicle, having your arms on both sides. No sunroof here, but there are the auxiliary switches up here on the top that we've come to expect in the Raptors. And of course, there is a separate fusible circuit for each one of these things, and the owner's manual will tell you where to find the leads for these, but they're basically for things like exterior lighting and other accessories that off-roaders tend to like to have. The glove box is rather large, but over here there's also an additional storage area up here at the top, so it sort of has a dual glove box, which I think is really a cool feature, definitely a step up in the way of versatility. And there is just another little shelf down below that for some additional things. The rear seat of the new 2024 Ford Ranger is actually a pretty roomy place for the class. I just had the Toyota Tacoma a couple weeks ago, and with the front seat set for my height, about 5'9", with my boots on, my knees were up against the back seat. Here I've got about 1 inch to 2 inches of space, and the best part about it is there's room underneath these seats for my feet. I can slide them underneath, and the seat height here is actually pretty good. I'm not sitting down in a hole, so compared to the Toyota, at least the new Toyota Tacoma, this is a much better back seat, and it's a little bit closer to what we see with the new Chevrolet Colorado as well. It is a pretty flat seat, and so it doesn't have a lot of side bolstering, but it is a pickup truck. One thing I will point out is there are no AC vents on the back of this console, and Chevrolet does offer that in the higher trim grades. Toyota does not, so it's not something that everybody has yet. I really wish it did. Down below is an AC outlet as well as USB ports for device charging. The seat does fold upward, the lower cushion. One thing I will point out, it's not a 60-40 split. I've seen owners complain about that. It's just one big piece, but there's a nice big storage well down there. Not a real big deal. If it were a full-size truck and only had one big piece, yeah, that would be pretty out of line. Here, it's right on the edge. I think they should have a 60-40 though. This is an interior that I'm very happy with. I like the design in general. It's very versatile. It's very livable and usable. The quality of the materials is good. For the most part, there was a rattle in the dash as we were out on the drive, but outside of that, the fit and finish in here is, well, I would dare say close to top of class right now. Not quite as exciting of a design, but one that works and one that looks like it's going to be pretty durable over time. This interior gets 4.5 out of 5 stars. The infotainment system here is all new for 2024. It is a 12-inch portrait-style screen, touchscreen that includes all of the audio, navigation, connectivity, cameras, the whole 9 yards. There's also controls down here for climate, in addition to the hard controls. They've given knobs for the volume, and the tuning is always there, able to change the channel on buttons. The graphics on this are really, really good. This has the Sync 4A back end. This has all of the features we expect at this price, including Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Those are wireless. Bluetooth connectivity. There's ports down at the bottom to connect for other things. Navigating around is very easy to do. Navigation screen. All the things you need to dive into to set this truck up the way you want are there. Then there is the 360-degree view monitor. Very well done, and this really has a good level of view, and that makes it helpful if you're looking for that rock or that branch or that bush, whatever the case may be. So good camera system there. This also has a number of screens for when you're switching into different drive modes, as well as 4 high, 4 low, and being able to get in there and control things like the locking differentials. And so they've really included a lot of good stuff in this infotainment user interface system, and it's all pretty easy to use and understand. I am very impressed. Ford's been doing a pretty good job here. This system gets 5 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, I had a good time with this truck this week. It's been a nice all-around, comfortable, nice glove to slip on, nice vehicle to live with all week long. Every time I got in it, I was just happy to climb in behind the wheel, fire it up and drive it around town and bring it out here like this. That is a bonus. Now, let's talk about, is it worth the money? Is it competitive? Well, is it a good value? $59,000 and some change. Some people already are going to be scoffing, going, oh, that ain't worth the money. That ain't worth the money. Well, look, here's the deal. And this is the lens I look through, right? I test a lot of vehicles. $60,000 isn't that much these days for any new vehicle. It just isn't. But I just tested the 2024 Toyota Tacoma a couple weeks ago. That vehicle was a TRD Offroad, quite a bit downscale in terms of, it's not a direct competitor to this, not in any way, shape, or form when it comes to off-road capability, horsepower, features, all that. The TRD Pro would be, right? That TRD Offroad that I tested was $55,000, and it wasn't even fully loaded. you could spend easily $60,000 on the TRD Pro, which would be almost a direct competitor to this. The only difference being this has a lot more power under the hood, but suspension and capability almost on the same level. So that's really where the competitor would be, maybe even the Trail Hunter on the Tacoma. But that truck's going to be $60,000 to $65,000 easily at your Toyota dealership. So in that light, given the off-road capability and the true hardware that this has, even I think above some of the things that the TRD Pro offers, especially with the engine and the transmission and the powertrain, this is a vehicle that at $59,000 I think represents a pretty damn good value. And yes, if you step up to the F-150 Raptor, you're going to spend a whole lot more than that, right? And the ZR2 Colorado, you're going to be in the same ballpark. So we're not out of line here on pricing. That's my point, especially when you compare it to its contemporaries that are available out there. So given the fact that it's very well done, it's a solid vehicle, I'm very impressed with the value conversation. I put value at 5 out of 5 stars. When you put that in with everything we've already talked about, we're at 4.7 stars for the total review. Excellent. And you know what else? It goes on my buy it list. Yeah, I like it well enough that if I were looking for a mid-size man toy, I would totally buy this. Now, a note on that, I have already put the Colorado Trail Boss on my I'd buy it list, and that extends to the ZR2. So I'd have a tough choice to make, but I think the thing that separates those two choices is the fact that this has a larger, more powerful engine that isn't working as hard as that Chevrolet with a 4-cylinder. And outside of that, they're pretty equal when it comes to suspension and capability and nuts, so to speak. So I'd have a tough time. And the other thing, and it's clear, is the fact that the Ranger is a much more conservatively styled vehicle than is the Chevrolet Colorado or the Toyota Tacoma. That's a given. So it really almost depends on flavor a little bit. And I do kind of like the more muscular look of the Toyota and the Chevrolet. If I were just going on looks alone, I'd probably definitely go that direction. But when it comes to just the best all-around truck, living with it, comfortable, and it feels good, this would be my choice. So there you go. I'd buy it. Yeah. So if you like what we do, you can see our latest video right there. Better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there. Either way, stay tuned.